Okay, thank you ever so much. Diolch yn fawr. Okay, item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence, please. Apologies, thank you ever so much. Item number 2, declaration of interest.
Sorry,
Members of
can
the
I
Fire
just
and
point
Rescue
out that
Authority
there's
reminded
feedback
that any
again?
personal responsibility declared both orally and in writing any personal or prejudicial interest in respect of the matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 2000, the Fire and Rescue Authority Standing Orders and the Members' Code of Conduct. Any declarations of interest, please, members? Chief?
I'll declare prejudicial interest in agenda item 4.2 and excuse myself from the meeting, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, Chair's announcements. On behalf of the Fire Authority, I would like to say huge congratulations to firefighters Georgina Gilbert and Rebecca Openshaw Rowe, who successfully skied unaided and unsupported 1,230 kilometres across the Antarctic to the South Poles. It just took them 52 days. It's a fantastic achievement. I look forward to welcoming you to the future Fire Authority meeting when they return. I would like to welcome and sincerely thank Fenella Morris, KC, who's joining us at the start of this meeting today, and express my thanks to her and the team, and Charlene and Gareth for the work in preparing the Culture Review report. I would also like to welcome Kate Thorngood and Mark Kirby, independent members of the Standards Committee, as observers for this meeting. I welcome representatives from Wales Audit as observers for the ongoing governance review of the fire authorities in Wales. I'd also like to welcome staff in attendance, especially the FBU brigade officials, and thank you for joining us today. Thanks to all staff, current and former, who bravely share their experiences with the independent culture review. I received, along with the Fire Authority members, correspondence from FBU officials. I have agreed to meet with the Chair, Gareth Tivy, to discuss how we can work forward in the Socials Partnership to implement the improvements required. This reflects the comments made by Kenneth Griffiths, Executive Council member of the FBU, who stated on BBC interview that the FBU were looking forward to working with the service to implement all recommendations, and also his comments on the Wales Line. On Wales Line, it is now incumbent on all of us, and I mean all of us, to work towards making the fire and rescue service a welcome and an inclusive workplace. Kenneth also stated there's no place for such inappropriate behaviour in the workplace. There is no place for such inappropriate behaviour in the trade union movement, and more widely, there's no place for such inappropriate behaviours in societies. I wholeheartedly agree with this. I've also received correspondence from the Welsh Local Government Association, especially their concerns of the topics raised in the report, and asking for my personal assurance. I and the authority will be taking full account of the findings and recommendations of the investigations to demonstrate our evidence and commitment to the change can be both seen and felt by all parts of the workforce, partners, funders and the public. I have replied to the leaders of all councils and to the Welsh Local Government Association. They've also offered their support towards future actions in taking forward the recommendations. On a Monday last week, I met with the Deputy Minister, Hannah Blythen, to discuss the review. I have responded saying my personal assurance that my commitment to accepting and implementing all the recommendations in full. Before we start the agenda of item 4.1, I would like to invite Fenella Morris, KC, to say a few words before we consider the full report in detail. Over to you, Fenella, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to the meeting. Thank you very much for the recent statements, which reflect very careful consideration of our report and reflect what's evidently the global commitment which we recommended to change. And really that's the message that I would like to reinforce this morning, which is that it's everybody who is involved in the fire service or works alongside it who is part of the change that is needed. And also to repeat what's in our report, which is what we found was a mixed picture, and there are a great deal of strengths in the service, and those strengths can be built upon to deal with the weaknesses that we also found. So thank you very much for inviting me to your meeting, and I wish you well with all the work that we have suggested and recommended could be done usefully in the service. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much for that, Fenella. Chief?
Thank you, Chair. For me to start to introduce the report, I'll let Geraint go through the detail. But for me to firstly say, I really do recognise the bravery and the courage that each and every person come forward to speak and share their experiences of working for and being in contact with the service over the last 7 years. I'd like to thank Fenella Morris KC and her review team for their diligence and their honesty and openness and how they drafted their report to allow us to shape a service that is inclusive and non-tolerant of any negative behaviour, discrimination and misogynistic behaviour. And on behalf of the service and from myself, I would profoundly like to apologise to anyone that has experienced negative behaviour or poor behaviour whilst working for the service. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Geraint?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I'll take you through the report on the independent review of the Culture and South Wales Fire Service. As we go through the report, I'll take you through some of the detail, and then, as set out in the report, I'll take you through a brief PowerPoint presentation, which is looking at the draft action plan that we are looking at to implement actions against the recommendations. In terms of background, members, you'll all be aware that following the news coverage back in December 2022, the Chief Fire Officer committed to commissioning an independent review of the service's culture, disciplinary processes and historical disciplinary cases. Following the appointment of Fenella Morris KC by an independent appointments panel, the review commenced in April 2023 and the work ran through then to the end of December 23. And the report was made public on January the 3rd, 2024. Following obviously the publication of that report, the report outlines there's evidence to suggest poor behaviours, sexism, racist comments and cases of domestic abuse exist within the service, despite all the efforts of the service to create a modern fire and rescue service in South Wales and trying to ensure that everyone is treated with dignity and respect. The report and the findings outline 82 recommendations, and these have been accepted in full by the service and by the Chief Fire Officer. Officers have commenced drafting an action plan, and I'll cover that off in the presentation. But before we get to the action plan, need to cover off some of the future governance arrangements that are required to implement all of the recommendations. Within the report, in paragraph 3.1, it proposes to create a culture review implementation committee for a period of at least 2 years to have oversight of all the recommendations and to ensure they are implemented in full. Paragraph 3.2 sets out the areas that allow this within the Constitution for the Fire Authority to create an additional committee and any working groups that are needed to discharge those functions. It's proposed that terms of reference will be drafted in readiness for the first meeting of such a committee, and that this meeting will meet at least quarterly. And then the proposal is that it will consist of at least 5 members of the Fire and Rescue Authority, and then made up of a suitable number of external independent members drawn from diverse backgrounds with relevant expertise, such as domestic abuse advisors, ethnic minority groups, disability groups and culture experts. The aim of this committee will be to support the authority and the service in implementing the recommendations and providing regular monitoring, scrutiny, feedback and advice in developing the ongoing proposed actions. The independent review found a significant number of cases of poor and inappropriate behaviours that have existed within the service over the period that the review covered, and that was the last 7 years. Such behaviours are damaging to the reputation of the service and have no place in a modern fire and rescue service and will not be tolerated. The report makes 82 recommendations set out over 3 phases. And these include an initial phase of 1 to 3 months, where there's 29 recommendations, a second phase over 3 to 9 months, where there's 42 recommendations, and a third phase, 9 to 18 months, where there's 7 recommendations. And then there's 4 additional annual recommendations as well. So in response to those recommendations, a draft action plan has been developed by the service, and we'll be looking to develop this further in wider consultation with staff and with representative bodies, and we'll be progressing this and reporting this through to the Culture Review Implementation Committee. Before I get to the action plan, just the final points within the report is to cover off the costs. The overall costs for the review itself are outlined within paragraphs 5.3, where the most up-to-date estimate of costs is that it's £432,775, £432,775, which is £92,775 higher than the original budget that was set. It is fair to say that the service is committed to seeing this through as investment for the future of the service, and we will be asking for the Treasurer to advise where that additional money would be drawn from appropriately from additional reserves. I take members now then through the proposed action plan. So I'll pull up a short presentation, cover off some of the detail, and then go through the detailed actions. Can I just check members online can view the presentation?
Yeah, I can see it clearly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I can as well.
Okay, so the Independent Culture Review was published on the 3rd of January, and it was published on the service's website with an open letter from the Chief Fire Officer. Communications were distributed in the morning. The link was went live at 12 o'clock, and then following the publication, the Middle Leaders briefing session was held by the exec leadership team, where 134 members of the Middle Leader cadre of the service attended, and all that were in attendance were asked to communicate those discussions widely and disseminate the information with their teams. The 82 recommendations were discussed and covered off at that point with the various stages. The report outlined the various themes of poor culture and inappropriate behaviour, standards falling short of that expected and demanded by our communities, assault, bullying, harassment, discrimination and other inappropriate behaviours, a lack of inclusivity and inappropriate conduct, negative treatment of female firefighters, informal networks and the existence of a boys' club, lack of transparency in promotion processes, a fear of speaking up, significant improvements required in all policies and procedures, and improvements required for disciplinary processes, and inadequate communications at all levels. The report also highlighted positive aspects in that there was a universal proud commitment to service the communities, a usually warm and supportive watch culture, the dedication, passion and commitment of corporate staff, an excellent internal occupational health service, positive measures to support mental health and the neurodiverse, the Chief's championing of the prevention of violence against women and girls, and a greater commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion. So we come to the intent following the recommendations and accepting the report. It's now the intent of the service to create a safe, modern fire and rescue service in South Wales and to ensure everyone is treated with dignity and respect, free from discrimination, bullying, harassment and inappropriate behaviours. I touched on earlier in the report the governance structure. So we set out the Fire Authority obviously as the overarching governing body, with the creation of the new Culture Review Implementation Committee. Sitting under that, we'll establish a Service Review Programme Board, which will receive reports from the initial phase where we will look at creating working groups within service, from cross-representation right across the organisation, looking at 4 working groups initially, reviewing policies and procedures, values, standards and leadership, training, promotions and recruitment, culture, ED&I and communications. All those strands, those working groups will review the draft action plan, develop the action plan and work as a commitment to implementing the recommendations, feeding up to a Service Review Programme Board and the Culture Review Implementation Committee, and then ultimately reporting progress back to the Fire Authority on a regular basis. The similar approach will be taken then reviewing the second, third phase and the annual recommendations going forward. Within the report, as I stated, over the 3 phases, there's different categories are highlighted within the report. So today I'll focus on initial phase 1, the 1 to 3 months, where we'll be looking at the actions proposed against communications action plan, values and standards, leadership, connecting people, speaking up, policies and procedures, temporary promotions, and the Fire Authority. And we'll use that same approach going forward then for the other phases. Apologise, obviously this is difficult to see on the screen, and I'll share the details of the presentation immediately after the meeting. But in terms of the initial phase, so against the communications action plan, the way we've set out the draft plan is to look at what we are currently doing, what we intend to do, and the change and difference that we expect to see from those actions. Against communications action plan, what we are already doing, the report was published along with the open letter and the other information. We held the middle leaders briefing on the day. The chief provided a media interview to ITV Wales, and we've initiated the development of this initial high-level action plan. What we intend to do going forward is we will host various question and answer sessions with staff during late January to facilitate open two-way discussions. We'll create a live frequently asked questions document with all queries from staff, sessions, and along with other answers will be documented. And we'll create the Culture Review Implementation Committee. The changes we expect to see from those will be that we will have higher levels of engagement across all staff groups, active involvement in shout forums right across the service, and detailed action plan will be developed on a co-creation basis with staff, and then monthly newsletters sharing the organisation's journey through to the change management. In values and standards then, the theme against that, we're currently, our current values are referenced in all our procedures and documents, and they are the foundation of behaviours we expect from members of staff. We've also joined various NFC working groups and working with the NFCC on the areas that they are looking at in terms of culture right across the fire and rescue service. What we intend to do, we will review the current suite of values with the aim of simplifying them. A communication campaign will be set up and leaders will be asked to demonstrate clear commitment to improvement in leadership behaviours. There will be formalised culture-related training, and we will devise a culture dashboard for the organisation, which will allow effective benchmarking by creating targets and goals. And the changes we expect to see will be renewed and invigorated values developed, and staff at all levels of the organisation will display the values in everything that we do. Against leadership, we've set up an oversight group with members of SMT that currently monitors progress against all disciplinary cases, grievances and complaints. All current budget holders and specific officers are currently asked to sign a related party transaction disclosure. Going forward, we intend to have an independent review of the performance of the executive leadership team, and that will be commissioned as recommended. Independent bodies will be involved in all SMT and ELT appointments. The eligibility for all roles in both ELT and SMT will be undertaken. All SMT and ELT members will sign a conflict of interest declaration, and the chief will participate in future oversight group meetings. And what we expect to see from that is a clear and demonstrable scrutiny and transparency around how leaders are selected and how they subsequently perform in role. Against the theme of connecting people, we currently have quarterly staff forum, the Shout Forum as they're called internally. There are various working groups and staff working groups, staff networks that exist. We'll be promoting them further. And a series of principal officer visits take place to all stations. Going forward, we intend to expand that programme of PO visits and map that out over the period of 2024. The chief and another member of the exec team will visit the joint control room and the training centre and to engage staff there and write a necessary report. And we will engage with staff to gather what safe spaces should look like and how the organisation can support these. And the change we expect to see is that all members of staff will feel empowered, supported and heard. And we'll create a culture where people continue to feel supported to contribute towards the ongoing success of the organisation. Against the theme of speaking up, we've already introduced the Crime Stoppers FRS Speak Up Anonymous reporting line. We have a resolutions team of 3 officers who impartially investigate complaints. And we have an employee assistance programme, and this was relaunched in September 2023, providing avenues of support and for staff to discuss issues and concerns that they have. What we intend to do is, following the recommendations, we intend to review the exit interview process. A review has already commenced, but this will be implemented and launched later in January. And we will incorporate the importance of staff speaking up into the relevant corporate procedures. And what we hope to see from that is reiterating the importance of challenging inappropriate behaviours and providing ample, safe and trust mechanisms to ensure that this can be achieved confidentially. And give the reassurances that all issues raised will be investigated. Against policies and procedures then, we currently, the disciplinary procedure was reviewed by the organisation's solicitors in recent years, and training has been developed for that. But going forward, we will instruct specialist employment lawyers to review our policies and procedures and to assist in drafting improved ones going forward. And based on an explicit recommendation, the P12 form will be removed from use in the service. And the changes we hope to see from that will be establishing a suite of policies and procedures that are effective and accessible to all, and a foundation for establishing the desired behaviours and expectations for all staff. And there will be simplified and accessible procedures which will enable staff to explicitly understand what behaviours are acceptable. Against the theme of temporary promotions, we currently have the organisation has a dynamic need to promote individuals in line with service needs, and that's occasionally done with urgency. But promotional pathways have been reviewed and updated, and routes to become eligible for promotion have been completely reviewed. Going forward, the organisation will pause the use of temporary promotions for periods in excess of 6 months and place an immediate review of any current temporary promotion, and will undertake recording reasons why and explicit reasons why it should be permitted to continue if needed beyond 6 months, and more importantly, the plans to end those temporary promotions, so an exit strategy for them. And the change we hope to see from that is minimising the number and duration of temporary promotions and to create a more stable staffing structure, and committing to more permanent staffing appointments through open, competitive and thorough promotional processes. And finally, in phase 1, there's a recommendation against the Fire Authority. And going forward for that one, we will review the statutory functions of the Fire Authority as were set out in Appendix 2 of the report. And I've engaged an independent body to assist in developing a report necessary to ensure that that is presented to the Fire Authority in a forthcoming meeting. In doing this, we aim to formalise the involvement of the Fire Authority in facilitating and implementing all the recommendations. As I said, that's the approach to phase 1. Going forward, we aim to adopt a very similar approach, and we will use that to reshape the service with that co-creation ethos with our staff and with the representative bodies. We need to ensure that it is meaningful engagement and consultation at all levels. At the next stage then, we'll also present a more detailed initial phase to the Culture Review Implementation Committee after that consultation has taken place, and then co-produce the future actions across the service and with partners utilising the social partnership spirit. Just before I finalise the report, one thing I've been asked to draw to members' attentions. I received a letter from Karen Phillips, the Deputy Director of the Community Safety Division in Welsh Government, who asked me to draw to members' attention the plenary session that took place last Tuesday in Welsh Government, where the Deputy Minister made a statement regarding the report. The record and the transcript of those discussions have been circulated to members. Following today's meeting and the outcomes of today's meeting, I've been asked to produce a report tomorrow morning for Welsh Government on the actions taken at today's meeting and the progress that we intend to implement going forward. And then they will make a decision on what action that they take. Obviously, at that meeting last week, the Senate, the plenary session, the Deputy Minister said that they would be taking action on the Fire Authority and the service. However, they didn't state exactly what the action would be, other than to say that it would be in the form of either support, direction, or intervention. So I think following today's outcome, they will then obviously digest the report that I put to them and make a decision going forward. Finally, on the report, I think just one thing to reiterate, that it's vital for members of the Fire Authority to have the confidence and assurances that we as a service are fully committed to implementing those recommendations and to making sustainable improvements for the future. And we wish to create a safe workplace where everyone is treated with dignity and respect and are free from discrimination, bullying, harassment and inappropriate behaviours. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Geraint, for that. Right, open to members. Okay, do you want to say?
Thank you, Geraint, for walking us through that. And I want to say thank you, as well as an authority member, to Fenella Morris for the report, and to everybody who has spoken out, and to everyone who's helped to create the safe space for that to happen. I personally, and I hope all members around this table, feel the level of personal responsibility to making sure that we provide the governance and scrutiny to make sure that these recommendations are implemented. And it's really good to hear the action plan. I'm looking forward to seeing the detail of that. I was encouraged by the comments. I think it's important to recognise that statement around it being a mixed picture. That there are a great deal of strengths to build upon to address the weaknesses. And so I've got a number of questions really around finding the assurance on any outstanding issues that may have been raised without going into any specifics here. As an authority, making sure that we are finding that assurance on anything that's been raised that's an ongoing concern in relation to cases. I think you've touched on this already, but that we find that assurance on identifying future issues and themes, changing those policies and how that we make sure that we see at an authority level exactly the culture across the organisation. And I think anybody, I've talked repeatedly about involvement. And that to me is crucial to that going forward, and how we really strengthen those. We've changed one of the strategic themes this year to include the word involvement. And so, I really want to see some more detail around that. Really good to hear about the visits to stations. That can't be a one-off thing. That's got to be an ongoing programme of involvement and engagement. And I've got a couple of technical questions on some of the points that you raised, but I think I'm going to hold those for the moment. Thank you.
Bethan, want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick point. I note your plans to hear from staff and to maximise engagement, and that's really welcomed. I just wondered if you had plans to ensure a high response rate, and especially from those who are underrepresented, because I think I saw from the Walk and the Talk report that there was a 25% response rate. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. And I think it said in there was only 10 respondents from the race group. That just feels way too low, and I just wondered if we recognise that, and then if we had plans to improve on that.
Thank you, Bethan, for that. Geraint?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, in terms of Kate's questions, yes, there's a commitment to the ongoing cases. So we will be reviewing that. We will obviously have to take stock of some of the statements made in the Senedd last week and see what that means for us going forward as well. But again, we all the cases that we're aware of, we're currently dealing with. Obviously, I can't comment on individual cases, but we are making the necessary progress that we need to make. But again, it's about reminding people, of the reporting mechanisms. If they have got concerns, there are various mechanisms open to staff to come forward now and report their concerns anonymously if needed. You asked about what does involvement mean. Obviously, we have been criticised within the report around levels of communications at all levels. So that's one aspect of work that we need to focus on and improve our commitment to communicating across staff groups. We will be promoting the actual report and running specific forums, staff forums to discuss the report and the detail and the action plans going forward. We will be inviting membership onto those working groups set up. So we'll be inviting membership across the organisation to participate and develop the ongoing action plan. But more importantly, we plan to do a lot more face-to-face engagement and face-to-face communication. So part of the plan, for those towards the end of January onwards is getting out there, meeting with staff more, and hopefully then, Councillor Proctor, that will address possibly your concerns about the response rate. So the more that we can do face-to-face, getting out, meeting with the staff within their teams, within their locations, and within the departments, that will ultimately increase the level of participation and target all staff groups. But we're open to suggestions, of other areas of improving our communication methods as well.
On that point as well, I met with the Deputy Minister on Monday, members. I actually get that commitment about the cases as well, that we need to look back at them. and also work with all unions, not just the FBU, just all the unions involved in South Wales Fire and Rescue. They all need to be engaged as well with this with us. Kerry?
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, I have a lot of questions about the report, but I'll restrict it to 3 at the moment, please. The main concern when I read the report, and I have to admit steam came out of my ears, and I do seriously wish to my full support and admiration for the staff who spoke out in terms of what they'd experienced and witnessed, etc., that was completely inappropriate in any workplace, never mind a public service such as the firefighters. You know, these people provide such a fantastic public service, you know, keeping us safe, and we couldn't admire them more. And I want, you know, what came through with the report, and thank you very much to Fenella and her team, was that, yeah, you know, the service provided by the fire service is excellent, but the culture within it is so inappropriate. It's, you know, it's beyond, you know, things we heard going on. And so my concern is that the mention of the report mentioned no names, and I won't, but what I'd like is assurance that action is going to be taken with regard to the staff, however senior, wherever they are, whose inappropriate sort of behaviours, for example, are mentioned in the report. For example, on the point about poor culture and standards falling short, it can't be right that a firefighter was allowed to have, I believe it's an OnlyFans account, posting inappropriate content. That's considered okay, whereas the firefighters wishing to post about taking the knee for Black Lives Matter was considered not appropriate. And then, so we need to know that action is being taken by that, and, you know, if other people might need to consider their positions, etc. And secondly, how will we, you know, we the fire authority, as well as the senior management and leadership teams, know that the actions proposed in the action plan have worked, for example, so that, you know, someone's already mentioned that there was only a 25% response rate to the Walking the Talk survey, which suggests, you know, clearly suggests the lack of trust that it would be anonymous, etc. And so therefore, will further exercises such as Walking the Talk continue? Will it be, you know, confirmed that it is completely and utterly anonymous and untraceable back to whoever posts whatever comments they feel they need to on it? And so we need to have the staff having the confidence that, as Geraint mentioned, that they feel empowered, supported and heard. We'll need to know how, and that information be fed back up to us, you know, going forward. And then finally, on that, in terms of making sure the staff are heard and empowered, etc., what involvement will there be for the Fire Brigade Union? I believe they have a vital role in helping move things forward. For example, are all the representatives, the workplace representatives of the Fire Brigades Union, have they all had, for example, training in things like inclusivity and diversity, for example, which I know are available from the FBU nationally or through the TUC, for example, so that then we have reps in the stations fully trained on these issues. I know from my own experience that, yes, in a majority male workplace culture, some poor behaviours can creep in, and we've seen that here in the report. And a way to address that is quite often in those workplaces, if there are all men, for example, they won't perhaps be aware of some of these things because these reflect minority people, people who are in minorities here in South Wales in the communities they represent, and so therefore in minority in the fire service which serves them. And so training on that thing for our Fire Brigades Union will then give them the voice from the other side, rather than obviously the training that's going to be brought forward by the service itself. Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome what Geraint have said, and yes, change is desperately needed. I welcome also the removal of the P12 form going forward, and that request more regular updates to the HR and Equalities Committee. I think that's needed. Greater involvement by the chair and vice chair as well. Thank you.
Geraint, do you want to reply to Kerry and to Avon?
Yeah, I'll cover off some of the points, and then if any of my colleagues want to jump in and add anything, by all means do. In terms of the actions taking place against those identified, like I said, with the specific cases we can't comment on. I mean, some of the points that you raised, they clearly identified within the recommendations, and we have given a firm commitment to addressing all the recommendations. So I can, there is a commitment to address those actions and make sure they are implemented. In respect of how will we know it's worked, obviously it is capturing as much data as we possibly can. So even going back to the question around engagement and involvement, is capturing the numbers of staff, the staff groups that are involved, and then seeing where we go on the journey of this. And I mentioned in the presentation is around having those metrics and the data around culture, creating those with targets and with measures that we can adequately capture and then report progress back to members. One such, an example being, you talked about additional training for ED&I. Well, we know that we've done ED&I programs online. We can capture, the numbers of staff that are completing the ED&I training and obviously feed that back. But then a commitment to ongoing ED&I training as well. I can't respond on behalf of the FBU in terms of training they develop for or present the officers, the representatives of the union. But there is a firm commitment to continue rolling out ED&I training across the organisation, and making that compulsory where necessary. We have introduced mandatory equality training this year, but it's making sure that we work on that, develop on that, and continue that going forward.
Chief, yeah.
Yeah, Geraint's picked up most of the points. I was going to just add to that. We've been undertaking investors in people surveys and review programs probably for 15 or 16 years, and there's been an iterative process as we've gone through that. I think a 25% response rate was fairly similar for those surveys and reports as well. So there's lots that comes out in the report, obviously. But one of the biggest standout for me is trust. It's about building trust and confidence across all staff groups to be able to have their voice heard and listened to and obviously acted on. So there's lots for us to be able to do that. And we've recently met with our IAP assessor as well. And there's obviously lots for us to modernise and update ourselves with social media, as that spins really, really quickly. You mentioned OnlyFans, there's other social media platforms as well that are referenced within the report. We need to make sure that we're an organisation and a service that got clear directions and procedures in place for all of our staff groups engaging on all of those platforms as well.
I can see Dan, then I come to Maureen.
I think Maureen was before me.
And you go.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my question is just links on obviously the question around training. In the report, there's obviously a lot of concerns with some corporate staff when they have operational managers in there was parachuted in with little training and support and only there for short periods of time. As you appreciate, obviously recommendations do obviously look at redressing that to a degree. Because I just want to be make sure there's extra, insurance that obviously anyone obviously operations staff before they go into a corporate management role does get the necessary training, because obviously they are different roles and obviously have different training needs required.
Thank you, Councillor Norton. Yes, so the report recognises that we do place operational colleagues into corporate roles as part of their own development, and for them to gain a wider awareness of working in the service. Going forward, as the report identifies, we will make sure we sit down and work with the individuals in terms of their skill set and plug any gaps as part of that skills conversation. So yeah, absolutely will be taking that on board.
Green.
Thank you, Chairman. What guarantee have we got that after somebody has reported discrimination against them, that they're not going to suffer of ongoing the fact that they've spoke out and the people that have discriminated against them might block them, or, you know, what guarantee have we got to the safety of the people that have reported difficulties?
Thank you, Councillor Powell. So at the moment, we've got several ways where people can report a concern. So they can do it through our whistleblowing procedure, through our Crime Stoppers anonymous reporting line, through their line manager directly. One of the things, and I think it's a clear message that we need to push out, is that we will not tolerate instances where, you know, there may be a perception that people feel that they're at risk as a result of reporting that concern. So that's a piece of ongoing work for us. But you know, what we have done so far is we have issued communications to staff reminding them of those support mechanisms, and you know, just kind of reiterating those systems that we have in place already, but we will continue to work to share those messages and work with people on that point.
Thank you.
Trevor. Trevor. You're on mute, Trevor.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
First of all, I'd like to thank Garrett and thank the Chair for all the hard work which they've done in regards to this report. Two questions. One is, how often are these recommendations going to be reviewed to ensure that they're working? And the other thing is, if further recommendations are required because they need the recommendations which we set out need amending, or new recommendations put in place to be able to encompass everything, how is that going to work?
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Obviously, in terms of how often they'll be reviewed, that is the role of creating the Culture Review Implementation Committee. So they'll be reviewed on an ongoing basis, so at least quarterly, but more regular if necessary. And again, within the role of that committee, if they feel there's new additional recommendations or amendments to the way in which the recommendations are discharged, that will be the role for that committee to make those necessary changes and recommendations going forward. I don't envisage you know, changing the recommendations, but in terms of implementation, it's around guidance and advice on how we implement and discharge the recommendations set out in the report. But you know, it's well within their remit to create additional recommendations to ensure improvements and, you know, better behaviours across the service going forward.
Not necessarily amendments. What I'm concerned about, if a particular recommendation which we're putting in place is not working for a particular reason, then obviously something needs to be able to be done to be able to bring it all back into line. Thank you, Chair.
Can I think that's a really salient point, Councillor Watkins. And I think it's the bit that's in the action plan that's been drafted already is the difference that we want to see to be made. And I think it's coming back to that, because we could just have an action plan that goes through the 82 recommendations, have a red, amber and green red status, so whether it's been done or not. The importance here is embedding and and having real change and embedded change across the organisation. And I would say for the review committee to come back when recommendations have been completed and to review them in time to go as well, to say, have that change, has it been embedded, and have we seen a change that we were intending to, or we seen something different? I think that and column is really, really important in this action plan.
I totally agree on that.
Yeah, thank you,
Definitely,
Chair.
definitely.
Thank you.
Member, please. Kate, did you say you wanted to come back and say, oh, Ian? Ian, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. There's no place for bullying, regardless of what the cause is. As regards inappropriate behaviour, so for us to change the culture of the brigade, we need to have buy-in from every single member. And I'd like to see an educational side to it rather than us just going straight down a discipline route. Because I was talking about the report with another councillor, and I made a reference to dark humour, directly referencing the report, and I was told that I couldn't say dark humour because it's inappropriate language. And I was talking to one of the female coaches at my local rugby club who took offence at a mention in the report of the rugby club culture, which is sexist and drunken and inappropriate. Now, 20 years ago, that would have been true. But if Fenella can make mistakes innocently in her report, which is she believes is being written correctly, for us to change the culture, we need people to be able to have confidence that they can hold their hand up to say that what they've heard is inappropriate and shouldn't be said again. But I think we also need people to know that they can learn to change their behaviours as well. It's not straight down the discipline route. I'm not on about bullying and harassment and stuff like that. That is totally unacceptable. But if people are accidentally saying things which is deemed inappropriate by others, there must be a mechanism for us to re-educate these people. Otherwise, you won't get buy-in from all the staff.
So,
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Absolutely agree with you. Education is key, but also we should not lose sight of the fact that the discipline procedure is there and is there for a reason. We had prior to Christmas, and the work is continuing, started to develop what we're calling a roadshow, which would go out to all staff and talk about and share, what's good behaviour, what's inappropriate. And of course, our appraisal process is built on the what and the how, so performance and behaviours. So yes, we are continuing to work on that education piece, but we shouldn't lose sight of the discipline procedure and why that is there also.
Martin?
Thank you, Chair. I think first of all, it is imperative that we as an authority accept the 82 recommendations in full and duly note that. I think most of the contributions already have addressed the points that I wanted to raise, but I think a key concern is the need perhaps to reallocate our resources as best so that we can implement these recommendations. And there will clearly be an impact on the HR section within the service. My question is, how can we consider how we can bring about or ensure that the necessary resources are given to HR? And have we looked at the possibility of bringing in any outside agency or firm who could assist us? Because we're looking at a major project, aren't we, to complete, in some cases, to completely rewrite and to review the policies that we've got, particularly the grievance and disciplinary. So it's a huge amount of work to be undertaken. I just want to make sure that we are resourcing ourselves properly, that we can deliver on those.
That was one of the questions I was going to raise afterwards, Martin. But yes, Alison, can you answer that, please?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, we have been looking at a new structure for the People Services Directorate, and that work is currently in progress. That will see us structured differently. and will help support the implementation of the recommendations. However, I think there probably will be an ask in terms of purchasing support as we work through the recommendations. And I'm thinking particularly around the policy review work, where the report recommends an external legal company being brought in. So I would imagine we will be looking at some extra resource and budget to support us on some of that activity.
Line 4, Ron.
Just to add to that point, obviously, Welsh Government said in the statement that they may be looking to work with us in terms of support. So yes, we'd welcome any support that they'd be willing to give. We've had early discussions with the Welsh Local Government Association as well, who have offered support as well. So yeah, again, we'll be reaching out to the WLG, and we've also received messages of support and a commitment to support from partners in local authorities and other emergency services. So it won't just be asking for a commitment for more funding. Yes, undoubtedly there will be an ask, but we will be looking at resources outside as well, which have offered that support.
Yeah. Marv?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I understand, Geraint, you did say that you were looking at employment lawyers as well to come into this review to look. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Roberts, one of the recommendations was in terms of reviewing our policies and procedures, especially the ones that are employee related. So yes, we're looking to engage specialist employment law solicitors to help us with that process.
Ian?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to ask, there's other public services have been through similar reviews. Is it worth us seeing how they've altered their policies and procedures rather than us reinvent the wheel and pay for the whole thing if it's already been done in other places?
I think in terms of the policies and procedures, obviously they're specific to us as a service and authority. But yeah, all the public service organisations that have been through similar reports, we have been having ongoing communications with them, and they're reaching out to us, and we reaching out to them. So those discussions are taking place to learn from each other. And undoubtedly, there'll be people reaching out to us now following the publication of our report to see how we take things forward.
Sure.
See, Councillor Melbourne, please. To see the screen.
Hi, yeah, thank you. So I agree with Councillor Buckley there. I'm just wondering how much consideration has been put into liaising with the other fire authorities to see what we can gather from their policies, and if we can learn from some of the things that they do. Firstly, and secondly, reading the recommendations on the temporary ELTSMT positions, will we be looking outside? What are we doing to look outside and to promote those positions? Firstly, as a permanent role, and secondly, to people outside of South Wales Fire and Rescue, in the other areas in Wales, and to ensure that we are adhering to the recommendations that we do need to be expanding and extending our SMT because of the position that we are currently in now.
Chief?
Yep, thanks, Councillor Melbourne. Yeah, for as long as I can remember, all senior posts on senior management team and the executive leadership team have always been advertised externally. My advice is obviously for that to continue, and for the advertisement to be placed as wide as possible as well, for that to continue in attracting the best talent into the organisation. I think picking up your point regarding other fire and rescue services, is a very active National Fire Chiefs Council. Most of the services within that are within England, and obviously they got HMIC, FRS, and they get audited and graded. So we'll be able to identify the services that are being identified as outstanding or good in that field, and then be able to pick off where we go to pick up good and notable practice. And then conversations, I've already spoken with the chiefs in Mid and West and North Wales as well. We do a lot of collaboration in Wales, and that will continue. So we can identify good and notable practice, as Councillor Buckley said, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and pick up good practice and transport it into here, so that we have the best procedures and the best culture that any service could wish for.
Anybody else want to speak? Okay. Kate, did you want to come back? You said earlier on you would say you're okay. Okay. So on page 7, we got the recommendations. So the recommendations are to endorse the recommendation set of the independent South Wales Fire and Rescue Culture Review Report, to approve creation of a culture review implementation committee with co-opted independent external stakeholders from relevant subject matter experts, to receive nominations from 5 members to join the implementation committee, and delegate authority to the treasurer to allocate reserves to cover full costs of an independent review. Can I have a proposal, a seconder for that, please? Right. Before we go on to the vote for that, could the members or the fire authority who wish to put their names forward for this panel, please can you by the end of today email Geraint, please, with your names, so we can start get things moving. Okay, so I will, for the vote on this, I will do a roll call of everybody, and it'll be a recorded vote for everybody, for the fire authority members. Okay, so we start off. Councillor Jen Morgan. Councillor Paula Ford.
I agree with the recommendations.
Martin Hughes. Councillor Ellsby. Councillor Hussey.
Agree, Chair.
Councillor Kerry Wright.
Agree.
Councillor Dilwar Ali.
Yes, Chair, I'm supportive of the proposal.
Councillor Gidcar.
Agree.
Councillor Melbourne.
I fully agree with the recommendations.
Councillor Dunn Norton.
In favour of recommendations.
Councillor Bethan Proctor.
Agree with the recommendations.
Councillor David Isaacs.
Agree.
Councillor Marine Powell.
I agree with the recommendations.
Councillor Laura Wright.
Agree with the recommendations.
Councillor Harvey.
Agreed.
Councillor Watkins. Councillor Watkins.
I think you're on mute, Councillor Watkins. Can you raise your hand or thumbs up if you agree?
It keeps going to mute for some reason. I agree with the recommendations to be adopted, Chair.
Councillor Holmes.
Agreed, Chairman.
Councillor Roberts. Councillor Williams. Georgina Williams. Councillor Georgina Williams. Councillor Alfie Best. Councillor Alfie Best. Councillor Steve Evans.
Agreed with recommendation.
Councillor Ian Buckley.
Agree.
Councillor Pamela Drake.
Agree with the recommendations.
And myself, Councillor Bradwick, I agree. Okay, so that's carried, members. 2 members did not vote. 2 members did not vote as Councillor Williams and Councillor Alfie Best. Okay, members. We go on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 4.2. Chief, can you leave, please? Okay, we on to agenda item 4.2. Alison, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as members will note, the report requests that you approve the recruitment of the role of a Chief Fire Officer stroke Chief Executive Officer, in line with the recommendations in the independent culture review that an independent body is involved in the recruitment process, and that members approve the indicative timeline that's set out within the report. Before I offer and open up to questions, just a couple of things to highlight to members that are contained in the report. You will have noticed that the request is to recruit a Chief Fire Officer stroke Chief Executive Officer. The reason I've positioned the report in this way is because some fire and rescue services have moved to a model of having a Chief Executive Officer as the leader of their service. What we can do if members wish is go out to advert with our options open. So position the advert so that it is addressing the need to recruit either a Chief Fire Officer or a Chief Executive Officer. The second thing in the report, just to flag, the timetable is actually quite ambitious and will depend on the conversation that we have today. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. But just to highlight paragraph 2.4 of the report, sets out the proposals for the appointment panel, which is the chair and deputy chairs of the relevant committees identified in that section. What I have suggested in paragraph 2.5 of the report is that the same model is used for the shortlisting panel also. So I would welcome views on that point. Paragraph 2.7 of the report proposes also that we extend shortlisted candidates the opportunity of having a fireside chat with the executive leadership team prior to their interview. Members may also wish to consider whether there is an opportunity to expand the appointment process to include other types of fireside chats. Now, that could involve an external stakeholder group. It could involve a staff panel, for example, or involving our fire cadets in the process. In terms of the independent body or individual to be involved in the appointment process, we have some thoughts on this, probably not for discussion today, but I can brief members privately should they wish to have a discussion about who or what is the independent body or individual to be involved in the appointment process. So that's as much as I wanted to say in terms of introducing the report. As I said, 3 recommendations, which probably we need to focus on, are that you approve the recruitment of the role of the Chief Fire Officer or Chief Executive Officer, that the appointment of an independent body or individual is involved also in the process, and that members are happy with the indicative timeline set in the report. And I'll pause there for any questions.
Thank you, Alison. I fully agree that with the extra, I believe that with this appointment that we should have a staff panel, that members of staff from unions, from all the unions, staff from the different departments should be like, if you interview for a head teacher of the school, where you have the pupil's voice, they just have some questions to the candidates to say what they are, and then those are fed back to the fire authority for that. I think that is really good. I think fire cadets, yes, that is good as well, because they are our future as well. They need to be involved in this process. I read in the report says that I can't remember it is now, that when appointing for chief officers should be for the 18 months. I think at a later date we need to amend that when senior appointments are made to the service, that an independent person is always on those committees. I think so. Not just for this period, it should be embedded into the constitution for the fire authority. I'll just leave it at that. Any members want to come in? Do I run first?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Chair, I would move this report. And following this culture review, let's start as we mean to go on then with the top job in the very beginning. And let's take on the suggestions that have been made, that we do invite others along to the interviewing committee. Thank you, Chair.
Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just to ask Alison about the titles that you presented to us. Are we advocating a combined title, Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive Officer, or to go for one or the other? And perhaps if Alison can just draw the distinction between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. There's a sort of a minor technicality in terms of the title there. If we was to appoint a chief fire officer, ultimately they would be the chief executive officer as well. This is following recent changes to legislation and the guidance that came out from the Independent Remuneration Panel. You'd probably be familiar with local authorities. It used to be deemed the term the head of paid service. That terminology has been removed now, and the term chief exec is the term. So ultimately, the current chief fire officer is the chief exec of the organisation. But if he was to appoint someone without the appropriate fire background, they would just be the chief exec officer.
I think it's a class two. It's a non-uniformed chief executive, chief fire officer, and there's a uniformed chief fire officer. I've got my views on what I would prefer. I will tell you my views is that the chief should be a uniformed officer, and that's my own personal view. So the view of the fire authority, but I think that going forward we need a chief that is uniform. That's my own personal opinion. It's not the views of this committee at all.
No, I think my view is that the appointment ought to be open as much as possible, and we encourage a really good response. I think the terminology of the title does need to be looked at a bit more carefully, though, just to explain to members of the public and all stakeholders exactly what is involved there.
You are right. It's the right person for the right job, and the word chief officer it does knock you out a bit. Who's on the line? Sue. My eyes are terrible today.
Hi, is this me? Yeah, I totally agree with you, Chair. The position needs to go to the best person who's going to fulfil that role. I do disagree with you that it necessarily needs to be a uniformed officer. I think we do need to be looking at the best person for that role, regardless of whether they're uniformed or not. And very much so, we should be sending this role far and wide to get as many applicants as we can, so that we can form change from the top down, really.
I totally agree with you, but I said that's my own personal opinion. That's my personal opinion. David?
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and I'm just saying that my personal opinion with regard to that as well. And it's I think it's really important that as an authority that you see that we have different views and we have different ideals of what we need to do, so that those people who are applying are not feeling that actually they're looking for a certain person for that role. And the fact that we have such, a difference in views on this, I think it is a benefit for whoever applies.
David?
Yeah, thank you. I totally disagree with Councillor Melbourne. We need the best person, yes. But somebody who's been stacking boxes in Tesco's would not understand the culture or the ethos of working for the emergency services. We do need somebody who's been there on the front line and actually knows the job to be able to make those decisions. Thank you.
Ian?
My personal feelings are the chief fire officer should have an operational background. 3/4 of the staff here are operational, and if you want to have buy-in into any change you want to make to this culture, you need to have the buy-in of the majority of your people. But also, if and when a major incident occurs, the chief fire officer is operationally responsible for that ground. There's still an operational fire officer, and as such, it should be an operational post and not just a managerial post.
And you were next, you Jeff.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Has any other authority appointed a non-uniformed officer in the chief's role, please? Because I'm in agreement it should be the best person for the job, whether it be uniform or not.
Geraint, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I know there are other services that do have a sort of a chief fire officer with a non fire background in their own. North Wales Fire Service being one.
Kerry?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think we're getting a bit confused potentially because the way, obviously, we absolutely must have an operational head, obviously, for the vital work of managing incidents and all the rest of it. I think we're getting a bit confused here with the title because, in my opinion, the person who holds the title of Chief Fire Officer would need to be a uniformed person. A person with the title Chief Executive Officer of the Fire and Rescue Service, for example, if that title exists, not what the title used by the person in the north is, that would be a separate person. I believe, as and when you explained it, so that if the decision was made to appoint a chief executive officer, so a non-uniform, a person who's an experienced then managerial professional, we would also then appoint from obviously the operational side of things, a chief then to be the chief of operations of the fire service. Is that my correct understanding? So that therefore we could effectively be appointing two people, a chief executive, and then obviously a head for operations. Am I correct in that, please?
I would say we're not appointing two chiefs in that scenario, but we would require the relevant technical operational expertise to be in support of.
Back in, Sue. Come back in.
Is this on me?
Melbourne?
Sorry, I can't. Yeah, I just want to clarify that. I mean, in my point, I did not suggest in any way that we would be employing somebody that stacks shelves in Tesco's, but that, you know, looking at the best person for the job. I can't see how, as mentioned, if we have a chief operating officer, that somebody from another service, for the ambulance service, for example, couldn't come over and if they were the best person for the job, to do that operational role. I just wanted to clarify, yeah, I wasn't looking at employing somebody that stacks shelves in Tesco's.
Thank you. Glyn?
Thank you, Chairman. I like the words of the terms of stacking shelves in Tesco's. I don't mean to be derogatory to anybody working in Tesco's, but at the end of the day, from my experience in building and working very closely with the fire service, it's got to be somebody look at the head of the fire service who has done the job. No question about it.
Kate?
Chair, it's clearly important that whoever we appoint is able to connect with the people who work so hard for this organisation and that they have confidence in that person. I think this is why we are asking to bring in the stakeholder panel that would be made up presumably of union and other workforce representatives, the cadets, as you've mentioned, and should be looked at to think about how, you know, we are representing a range of different people. Now, that leads me to my second point, which is it's crucial that we reach the widest possible audience for this, from an equalities, diversity and inclusion perspective, from seeking out the best talent to come and support this organisation and its aims and intents. I think that is what we're all working towards. What these recommendations are doing is building on advice that's been given, practice that is developing elsewhere, and giving us options in making that appointment. Clearly, it is crucial that we appoint somebody with the skills and the ability to connect to the organisation, understand the culture it has been, and work with everybody to create the culture that we want to see. So with the addition to the recommendations around that stakeholder panel, I wouldn't use the language fireside chat in relation to the stakeholder panel, but with the addition of that to those recommendations, I would support these recommendations.
And I think you're quite right. The crux of the matter is the outside bodies that's going to be sitting on the panel. You know, we want to hear the views of those panels when they interview, because they will be like an interview to whoever applies to this post to say what they want, and they got a feedback to us. And we must listen to their views, not just our views as well. I think that is the must of it. And yeah, I said fireside. I don't like that word either. I think it should be a panel. It should be a panel, definitely, of the unions and staff, or even of a union panel and a staff panel. I don't care how many panels you have, as long as you have quite a few panels to do this really rigorously. Because I think this is the must. We've got to get this right. Anybody else? Oh, sorry, Kerry.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to come back. Yeah, I totally agree with the idea. Yeah, stakeholder panel to be involved. Yeah, with all the people who've been mentioned included. The only thing I'd like to point at this point of time is concern that in terms of the debate we've had in this room with mentioning of people, you know, saying it can only be a person who's been in uniform, when remember we've got a report here which one of the criticisms is obviously with regards to the training of the managers from the uniformed side, because obviously they're trained to be professional firefighters first and to lead firefighters in the operational side. And you know, the mention of, for example, the short-term promotions and lack of consistency then in the corporate side leads to challenges because of a lack of training of the managers in how to manage. You know, that is a separate skill. You know, these people are experts at what they do in keeping us safe, and they do so brilliantly, and we support them fully and, you know, in all the ways we can to make sure they can do it as safely as possible. But that doesn't necessarily mean the person who's ideal as leading firefighters is ideal as leading the overall service, including the corporate side. And so therefore, I think we need to make sure that in sort of the shortlisting and everything, we have commitment from the people who will be on that shortlisting panel that they will absolutely be giving a, you know, a fair, impartial take on all applicants in terms of then shortlisting, and not prejudicing, for example, someone who does come over or apply from the corporate, even the corporate retail world, with reference to the Tesco's earlier on, because we need professionals in all levels, and we need people with the right skills and experience in all levels, and we can't prejudice who will be the most appropriate person for the next chief fire officer before we've even sent out the advert inviting applications. Thank you.
The recommendations are the members approve the sorry. David, do you want to come back?
Yeah, thanks. Having listened to all the reports, and we want the firefighters on our side. We want them to realise that at the top, they've got somebody who's done the job. I understand what you're saying about getting the right person there. But after all, if they're on a fire scene and they've got to go into a building, they want to know that the person at the top has got their back. And being from an emergency side of it, I always preferred somebody who'd actually done the job to know that they got my back and was supportive of me if I was on the ground. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We going on and on and on here now. So I think we go to the recommendation. Do you want to say something, Kate? And I've
Just as amended, Chair, was the point that I was going to make. The recommendations as amended.
yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah. So the recommendations are that members approve the recruitment of the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive Officer in line with the recommendations of the independent South Wales Cultural Review Report and an independent bodies involved in the process, plus panels of staff, unions, and here I go again, fire cadets. I think that's the most important. So I will just say that again, for staff panels, union panels, and fire cadets to be on this interview process as well, right the way through. And even when it comes to the appointment, that they can be in the room seen for the appointment as well. And that members approve the recruitment timetable as laid out in the report. All members are happy with those recommendations. I'll do a roll call like before, if possible. Councillor Morgan? Oh, sorry, I saw my mistake. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Sorry.
I move that, Chair. Yeah.
Okay. So Councillor Morgan? Councillor Ford?
Agreed.
Councillor Hughes? Somebody got a microphone on, please. Councillor Aylesbury? Councillor Hussey?
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Keddy Wright?
Agreed as amended, thank you.
Councillor Dilwarali?
Yes, Chair. I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Carr? Councillor Melbourne?
Agree.
Councillor Norton?
Support.
Councillor Proctor?
Agree.
Councillor Isaac?
Agree.
Councillor Powell?
Agree as a revised recommendation.
Councillor Allwright?
Agree.
Does that agree? Yeah. Councillor Harvey?
Agreed.
Councillor Watkins?
Agree the recommendations, Chair.
Councillor Holmes?
Agreed, Chairman.
Councillor Roberts? Councillor Georgina Williams? Councillor Georgina Williams? Councillor Alfie Best? Councillor Alfie Best? Councillor Steve Evans?
Agreed.
Councillor Ian Buckley?
Against Chief Executive. I think it should be a Chief Fire Officer, so I'm not voting in favour of appointing a Chief Executive.
So is it an abstention or against?
I'm against.
Against, okay. Councillor Drake?
Agreed.
Myself, Councillor Bradwick, agreed. So there was 2 non-votes and 1 against. The motion is carried. Thank you, members. On to the next item on the agenda. On item 5, reports for information. Forward working programme. Yeah, right.
Thank you, Chair. Just the standard work programme now for the remainder of the municipal year. Obviously, the programme included the additional meeting on the items for today's meeting. And then we got the February and March meetings. Just 2 items I'll need to add to the February work programme. I need to present a report on the outcome of the last Fire Authority meeting, where I was asked to make amendments to the Constitution linked to the appointment panels going forward. So I'll put an update report on that on the agenda. And I need to add a report to approve a contract for our cleaning services, which is in excess of the levels which I have delegated authority to approve. So I'll need to bring that forward for approval before we can sign off that contract.
Okay. That's it. Well, I got no urgent business. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you ever so much, everybody. Diolch yn fawr iawn.